Happy Easter!
Happy Easter. I'm looking forward to my Easter dinner and my Easter basket.
Yes, are you going to do ham?
You know, that's a good question. Because my brother-in-law hates ham, but he likes turkey. So we often do turkey at Easter.
I need to come over to your house because I love turkey, and we only eat it at Thanksgiving in our place.
No, Peter, we just need your salmon again.
I love salmon as well. Well, we're
coming over at 3:30 because we're going to start eating at 3 o'clock, and you can have
I get the leftovers.
That way somebody will get some food.
That's true friendship. I'm going to give you the leftovers because I love you, brother. Well, we'll see what Pastor Ken has to say about the Easter season.
Interesting interview last week.
A very interesting interview, and we're also going to talk a little about the idea of science and religion and where they overlap.
And technology these days.
And technology, yes. I'm really looking forward to it. Please welcome back Reverend Ken Robertson.
Welcome to the third chair. This is our special Easter outfit. Look at you wearing green. I'm wearing red. And you're wearing your pastor.
That's right, but I'm wearing the one with the polka dots.
And we kept him in the basement all week.
That's right. I didn't get to go do anything. Yeah. But the Lord is risen.
He's risen indeed.
Hey, there you go. Happy Easter. Happy Easter.
So the good thing was, though, that because of our not wanting sound to come in here, nobody could call you on the phone.
That's right. I was just here with you guys all week long. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we brought your wife and kids here for a visit.
Exactly.
Say hi to Daddy.
They've got me trapped here in front of all these cameras and bright lights.
And Peter smells funny because he wouldn't take a shower.
I hate to tell you this, but when you slipped your daughter that note, we took it away and said, help, Peter's driving me crazy. So before you were a pastor, did you have any other jobs that didn't involve being...
Yeah. Didn't involve being a pastor. Yeah, no, I was actually, so I was raised on a farm in Middle Tennessee, a 150-acre farm, beef, cattle, chickens, all that. And there were a couple summers where I worked formally, like for my dad in that. But actually that was just life, right? Working on the farm. Anytime you weren't doing anything else, you were working. So that was a whole season and different jobs and things that came out of that. But then education-wise... I actually studied chemistry and physics and math. I was a chemistry major in college with a physics minor and almost a math minor. And so that was a lot of my educational background. So right out of college, and in the midst of college, I was working jobs that were focused on chemistry specifically. And doing a lot of chemical education, actually. Going around to schools and doing shows. Chemistry shows for kids.
So mix stuff up so it looks...
Yeah, mix stuff up so it blows up. I mean, basically, yeah, lots of different versions of that. But yeah, my dad actually did that for years. He had an alter ego lab man. So faster than a speeding electron, more powerful than a thermite reaction, able to leak tall test tubes in a single bound. That was who he was.
Is that when you do?
No, I did not. I couldn't take. I mean, that's
your dad was a farmer and a chemist.
He was a farmer and a chemist. That's right. Right. So I kind of grew up with both those things as I went along. But so I worked in tutoring and I worked going around to schools and teaching kids about science and creation, which was absolutely wonderful fun. But then...
What was the best chemicals that you mixed up?
Oh, man, there's so many great things we did. One of the best things we did was actually using liquid nitrogen to make ice cream. Have you ever seen this?
No. I've seen versions just using cream and ice.
Yeah, it's a hit in like the really fancy restaurants. They'll bring a little thing of liquid nitrogen out to your table. But liquid nitrogen is basically air that's been cooled down so much that it becomes liquid. And... when it's exposed to air, it bubbles and froths and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So you pour it over ice cream mix, and it instantaneously freezes the ice cream mix, but is also bubbling at the same time, so it puts some air into it, and you actually makes wonderful ice cream. So My dad's probably served
Now
ice
I'm
cream.
really
too.
hungry.
Yeah, totally. He's probably served ice cream to like
So-
30,000 kids over the years. I've probably done a couple thousand.
You know,
so.
I never had that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I feel deprived.
Well, maybe on another episode of the Third Chair we can bring it in and we can do it for you.
Yeah, we're gonna have a chemical
this
show.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's an unseen side of my life that often doesn't come out. But that was a whole season, and then really sensed a calling into pastoral ministry, which wasn't like a shift away from science for me, but just a shift to a different aspect of what God's up to. Because my dad always taught me as a scientist and as a believer that the idea of miracles and the idea of a world that can be described by science, they don't conflict. They actually cohere in really beautiful ways. So it was just kind of changing. Okay, what kind of work of God am I focusing on in my career? I'm not moving. I'm not moving away from this. I'm just looking at, instead of the work of God in nature, to now what is God doing in people's lives? What is God doing in souls?
Well, several of the early scientists, believed that God created things with order, and if they took the time to study it, they'd discover the laws he made. It was actually one of their presumptions of why it was even worth the time to do it.
Absolutely. And actually, there are all kinds of people, we could talk about this a long time, but there are all kinds of aspects of science which we assume, things like the universe is consistent. Things like mathematics can describe the universe. Things like the design of the universe, like so many different cosmological constants that if they were just a little bit different, we wouldn't be able to live here, right? Mm-hmm. The universe as we know it wouldn't exist. So many of those things actually fit better in a world with a God who is consistent, who is upholding all things in consistency, than they do just, it just randomly appeared, right? A lot of those things need to be explained. And so the early scientists were all either, many of them, from an Islamic frame of mind, or a Jewish frame of mind, or a Christian frame of mind, because they had the assumption built in, there is a God, he's consistent, he's reliable, he does things in an orderly fashion. And so if we look more deeply into this, I bet we can figure out something consistent that's under there that he's made. If you don't have that kind of belief underneath, why is all this the way it is? There's no good reason to think it would be.
Well, I'm going to study something assuming everything's random. Maybe I'll get lucky and find a law.
Right.
But if I think everything truly is random, then
you wouldn't go looking for a law.
You wouldn't go looking for a law.
Right. Which is why, in terms of pre-Christianity, like paganism, like nature religions didn't do science because they saw nature as capricious. They saw it as random. They saw it as good and evil forces battling each other out without any kind of pattern. And it was the Christians who said, no, if God's in control of all this, if there's a mind underneath this, there should be some order to be found. So let's go looking for some order.
Mm-hmm. And that's still looking.
That's right, and we're
Yeah,
absolutely,
very
absolutely, yeah. So
I read the other night Sir Isaac Newton tried to figure out Jesus' birthday by going through the circulation and figuring out there was an eclipse on. Mm-hmm. That wasn't his birthday. That was what the day he died. But I think he did both.
Yes, so many of those early scientists considered themselves committed believers.
But he uses science to figure out, hey, this is possible dates that Jesus was crucified.
Absolutely.
So
one of the ways of talking about it was there were two books that God had revealed himself in, the book of nature and the book of scripture. And we needed both books to understand who God was more fully. So in one sense, in my employment, in my career shift, I kind of shifted from one book being primary to the other book being primary. But I've always enjoyed being able to walk into conversations about both books and to be able to talk about God from either one of them. Yeah.
Interesting. And then when you're on the farm, you mentioned all these animals, like the cows. Were they milk cows or?
No, they were beef cattle. They're not too many milk cows in Middle Tennessee. They were beef cattle. So we have always had like enough to keep us busy, but not enough to actually make any real money on. So
that's why
somewhere
the chemistry
between.
Part for
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's. I mean, hobby farm is not a strong enough word. Like it's a lot of work, but it wasn't a way to earn a living. I mean, if you're familiar with rural America, small farms now, I mean, you have to have such a scale in order to really make a living. It's really, really difficult. But in Middle Tennessee, you still got these little small farms around, and our farm began, our family settled it, first family to settle it ever in the 1880s. Our house was built in 1910, and it's been in the family. It's been in the family ever since.
So still in the family. Who takes care of it?
Mom and Dad still take care of it. My sister's there in the same county. When I go back to visit, I'm pretty much on a tractor the entire time, like working on the farm, doing things.
So how old were you when you drove a tractor? First time.
How old was I when I first drove a tractor?
I asked this because my dad was talking about he was on a tractor when he was 6 or 8 years old.
Yeah, maybe not quite that young, but I would say no younger than 10. We had this old blue Ford with a Selectomatic transmission. It was a much better technology than what actually won out overall with the clutch, but it was a fantastic, almost semi-automatic transmission. And I was driving that thing, moving hay bales and doing all kinds of stuff from a very early age, gaining all kinds of like practical tools and practical knowledge and skills that are utterly useless to me now. I get to use none of them.
A good work ethic.
A good work ethic. Yes, no, but in terms of like, I don't know how to do carpentry or masonry or any of that kind of stuff. But man, you asked me how to grease up a round bale hay baler. Like, I can do that in a hot minute. So,
can you imagine your 10-year-old daughter driving the tractor?
Oh yeah, she already does some. She already does some. We go visit.
Excellent.
When we come back, we're going to talk about your courting days in the farm.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Welcome back to the third chair. Peter is still happy.
I'm happy and awake.
Yeah. So you having ham or for Easter or?
Yeah, ham.
Ham.
Yeah, ham.
Ham.
Yeah. I like eating bizarre things. I'd eat turkey on Easter. I'd be happy to make salmon on Easter.
You've done the salmon. That's always good.
The right meal for every holiday is tacos. That's the right
spaghetti tacos.
Tacos. You can do all the different kinds of tacos. We do tacos for Thanksgiving.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Jesus was sneaking around the rock making tacos, going, they're just going to love this. That's
right. He was making fish tacos.
Yeah.
Fish tacos.
So there's a story Peter's giving me hints of that according to your wife.
Yes.
She worked on the farm. But I'm going to ask you first, how did you meet your wife?
Yes.
What's the circumstances that she was on the farm?
So I finished my chemistry degree at a school in Tennessee, Austin Peay State University.
I've heard of it.
Let's go P. That's our cheer, not lying. And I had a mentor who had been helping me meet Jesus more deeply, read the scriptures, who had gone up to the University of Wisconsin. And so I actually followed that mentor up to the University of Wisconsin to work with the group.
I always think of the University of Wisconsin as a religious place.
No. But I was involved in campus ministry there, working with an organization called the Navigators. Some people may be familiar with that or not. Yeah. So I followed him up there, and Sarah at that point was a student in the Navigators. And at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, she was a senior. I was 1 year out, and she terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. Because she was so competent, she was so beautiful, and she loved Jesus so much. She was starting up campus ministries and the business program, which is where she was doing work and all this kind of stuff, and I thought she was way out of my league. Well, after about a year of dancing around one another, one night she said, is there anything you want to say to me? And I was like, well, I want to think about the possibility of having a discussion of perhaps one day thinking about dating. So terrified. So terrified.
Truly
Such
the
a
bold and the beautiful.
Yes,
You really covered it.
she was gracious, and so things happen. But we started dating after that. But that meant I had to take her down to Tennessee. Now, my wife mistakenly thought the Civil War was over. But when you go to Tennessee and you're a Tennessee boy and you bring back a Wisconsin girl, everybody's like, well, who's the Yankee? Like, what's going on? She had never heard that term in like regular conversation before. But I brought her back to the farm that first summer we were dating. And my parents just decided they were going to show out. So we had a squirrel infestation that summer. So my dad had shot a couple squirrels who were eating the corn in the garden. And he called me up on the way down. He's like, we're going to skin those squirrels. We're going to eat them for breakfast tomorrow. I never had squirrels in my entire life. We're not that kind of farm. But lo and behold, the next morning, here's 4 squirrels out. And Sarah, my goodness, she got right in there. She skinned those squirrels with my mom. Just had no problem with it. We fried them up. We ate them for breakfast. That was part 1 of the day. And I thought,
so
oh my gosh.
your first time squirrel to eat?
Oh, it was the first time. No, I've never eaten squirrel before or since. It was just to intimidate her.
But that had to impress you.
Oh, it terrified me. My parents were going to submarine this thing. But she hung in there. Next, we had to go work on the cattle. We had to do some castration and vaccination on the cattle. So she was down on the floor of the barn with me, holding this calf down as we're banding it and castrating it and all this kind of stuff. And then at night, I was like, okay, we've made it through the day. We went on a hike out in the woods because we've got a whole lot of timber land. And we get back, and we both go take a shower separately. Because we're dating, and my dad pokes his head while I'm taking a shower. He's like, Ken, I think this is really bad for you. I was like, what are you talking about, Dad? He's like, Sarah's got hundreds of chiggers, these little tiny ticks that you can barely see all over her, and she had to ask my mom for a pocket knife to scrape them off. I mean, they're all over her. And so she gets out of the shower. We talk later that night. And I was like, you survived today? And she's like, I did. And I'm like, okay, I think this is going to go okay. So she toughed it through. But it was a heck of a first day on the South, in the South.
You knew she was a keeper.
I knew she was a keeper. I knew she was a keeper.
She's tough as nails, figured that out too because of the
no, totally. They figured it out. I mean, she's in school for nursing right now. She's tough as nails. Like, you can't intimidate her. She's as steady as she goes. Steady as you can be. She's definitely the better half of us, and that day proves it. So, no.
And good for you for coming to that realization.
That was the first time.
I made it over my head. Yep. Like way over my head. Way over my head. Yeah.
No, she's a trooper. She's a trooper. Yeah. But no, it's a fun story to look back on.
Yeah. So I've heard you talk about this before. The whole idea of technology, sometimes it helps us flourish, but perhaps there's some dangers. Now, I just want to say, in terms of context, I've heard kind of these arguments for a long time. It was the printing press. It was the radio.
Right.
It was television. It was the internet. It was, every time there was a new advancement, it was just spreading evil kind of thoughts. Yep. But I know you have some other interesting takes on that. What's your thought about some of those ideas? Yeah, no,
I do think we have those gut reactions to technology. I think it was Douglas Adams who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, great.
He talks about that if you're born and something already exists, it's just normal. If something comes along before you're 30, it's super cool. If it comes along after you're 30, then it's utterly evil and of the devil until you get 10 years down the road and you're like, okay, maybe this is okay. That's usually our gut reactions. But I do think there's something to be said for the pace of technological change that we're going through right now is utterly incomprehensible in the history of the world. I mean, you think about Abraham Lincoln. If Abraham Lincoln, mid-1800s, was dropped in Abraham's day, and then dropped in our day, Abraham's day would make more sense to him. Like, the amount of technological change that's happened in the last 150 years has been utterly overwhelming. And I think we can get overwhelmed by the access by the speed. I think we can get overwhelmed by the personalization of technology to us, where like on social media or the internet, everything becomes about what we want. Right? Everything becomes curated and focused just for us. We never actually have to encounter a living person in a third chair, right? And actually hear a
really
different
hate
perspective.
easily and get away with it.
That's right, absolutely, because they're dehumanized because they're on the other side of a screen, right? And all this is coming at us so fast that our ability to discern, our ability to make decisions is actually shutting down. There have been studies where if you give our brains too much input, the prefrontal cortex, right, the place that makes decisions, like shuts down. It just goes dark because it can't take all the input. Right. And so I think it's one of those places where it's not necessarily evil, but it is powerful. It's sort of like the information version of a nuclear bomb. Like you're walking around within your pocket on your smartphone all the time. And so where there is lots of power, there just has to be lots of discernment and lots of wisdom in terms of how do we use this tool, because that's what it is, it's a tool, to actually help us flourish and become more fully human. I got to the point where my smartphone, I would check it like 30, 40, 50 times a day just to see what was on the news. I wasn't looking at anything bad, but I was just told, it was distracting me from the world that was right in front of me. And so a couple of years ago, I got rid of my smartphone and went back to a dumb flip phone, right? Like you had back in the day.
You know what I don't like, and there's been studies to prove this, that teens have really high rates of depression from looking at a lot of social media.
Absolutely.
And it's because they see all these people that have put their make-believe stories on it, and they come to the conclusion, your life is great and mine sucks.
Right.
It's like the old Christmas card syndrome.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You get the Christmas cards and everybody looks so cute. That's one of the interesting things about being a pastor is I see people's social media or their Christmas cards, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I know the actual story of what's happening here. That's just
Liar, pants on fire.
No, not a liar. Just like half the story, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there is truth in those things, and I love the ability to communicate with family and friends and people you lose touch with, et cetera, et cetera. That access is beautiful and good, but if you're only giving half the story, you're telling a lie. Right? And there's so much of that puts people into places of despair that hurts our mental health. That sometimes we've got to be wise in how we use it.
And when we get back, we're going to discuss this issue more.
Hi, Peter and Doug here from the Third Chair. We're looking for a win-win situation. We want to keep these videos put up on a weekly basis, and we want to help you succeed with your business adventure.
And we've brought up as a show a lot of important issues that people are interested in, and we brought up a lot of local actors and artists and bringing them forward, which helps them as well as our audience members in finding some of these things.
So there is an email on the screen. Send us a note if you're interested in knowing about some of our sponsorship packages.
Welcome back to the Third Chair, and I
can't get a word in edgewise during these segments.
I talk a little, he starts crying, and he
you're up against a pastor here. Like, this is real competition for you.
Yeah, I'm outnumbered. Yeah, and you got God on your side.
You got God on your side too, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So Peter and I's birth dates is closer to the Wright brothers' first plane flight than they are to right now.
Wow.
When you think about it that way, it shows
the rate of technological change is insane.
Because, to our birth dates, it was from the airplane first flying to what we had at the time, which, I mean, there was advancements,
That's crazy.
but not like this time frame now.
Well, when I was young, my dad worked with computers, and the computer that's the size of my smartphone would fill a house.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's
When
just-
when I went to college, I was an accounting major. I learned to write four
Fortran?
different
The number 4?
languages,
Oh.
computer languages,
Yes.
so I can communicate with the. Fortran was one of the
Yeah.
4.
Yes. Yes.
But you know, and like your farm life,
Mm-hmm.
and this is something I learned in college.
Mm-hmm.
When I
It
went,
hasn't done me. It doesn't do me any good.
Yeah, exactly,
because,
yeah.
I mean, you get the.
It trained your
computer
mind,
system.
but yes, no,
Yeah.
I
that
did
was
my
it.
BSc my first year in '78. We used slide rules.
Yes.
You know, a calculator of some sort came out a year or two later that could basically add and multiply, and that was it.
Yep. I had grown up a Commodore 64. You remember Commodore
Oh, that's
64
right.
computers?
That
I
and a
had-
big 20
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
to your TV.
I had a K Pro, and it was 64K,
Yeah.
and they said it was mobile because they put a handle on this 35-pound thing. And it was great. It was gray, and I carried it around, and I used it for work.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the
Oh,
first.
for a mobile cell phone.
It was a computer.
Oh, it was a computer?
It was 64K, and I carried it around. I mean, and I traveled quite a bit in my job, and I'm carrying it around the country. And our computer, we had to have a special computer person. He looked at it and he says, "Yeah, the K Pro, Darth Vader's lunch box."
Darth Vader's lunchbox.
I mean, my first cell phone in 1990 was this giant battery with the phone just on top and this giant man purse that you carried around, and Walmart sold plastic car phones that people would put in their cars for status.
Yes,
you know,
totally.
You know, and then we think, you know, Captain Kirk of Star Trek,
Right.
you know, Kirk to Enterprise. We're living that.
We're
Well,
living-
remember the early modems, your rotary dial phone
Yes.
that you would pick up, dial the number, put it on the little piece in order for it to talk.
Right. It's amazing how quickly it's transformed and how much power we now have. Just how accessible it is.
Dick
to us.
Tracy, they had the talking phone. They had the Apple phone.
Yeah,
And when I
yeah.
was a kid, I remember reading Dick Tracy and
Totally.
like, yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah, and you notice, I even find it changes how I communicate with my kids. If I said something, I'll give you a ring, you know, like the old telephones
Oh, sure.
actually used
I'll
to
give you a
ring.
ring.
They will look at me like, what are you talking about?
You're giving them a
Dad?"
doorbell. You're
Yeah,
giving them a
yeah,
doorbell,
I have
right?
no
Yeah.
idea. Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, it's
And so so in this like new world, figuring out like what of this is helpful and what of it isn't, because probably all of us are like, oh, I've spent too much time on this, or I can't get out of this, when it comes to smartphone or internet or stuff like that. But it's also become such a regular part of our lives that helps us in a ton of ways.
Yeah.
Like we've got to be able to discern like the right use of that stuff.
well, there's definitely phone addiction,
Oh, it's
internet
real.
addiction, all kinds of problems that can come from the internet.
It's real.
of course. But you know, but I wouldn't want to turn back the hands of time when, you know, people were dying at birth from very treatable diseases.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
that, you know, it's
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, and that's one of the interesting things about the biblical story is the very first two commands in Scripture are fill the earth and subdue it, right? Fill the earth, like multiply, but then subdue it. Do something with the earth. Make something of the things that you've been given. So it's actually part of who we are as humans to make things. It's just that sometimes the things we make can make us in ways that may be helpful or may not be helpful. So we just have to pay attention to it.
You know, one thing I noticed, you know, like it started out getting my kids a cell phone for emergencies. And so then when I call them and they don't answer, now I'm the one that's anxious.
Ah, yes, absolutely.
You know, you're supposed to have that for an emergency. You're not answering it. Are you okay? You know, it's
Yep.
like this is not how I planned this to be.
Totally. Well, every technology has values to it. And this is one of the things I teach on. And one of the values of personal digital technology is access, right? You should have access at any time you want, to anything you want. Right? We get so ticked when something's behind a paywall, right? Because like, oh, I can't access it right now. Like, it's built in us, like, oh, we should be able to get to it at all times. When that was never the assumption before, and it's created this false expectation that we're always going to be available to everyone all the time. which we can't actually be because we're finite.
Well, and also we don't always have truth available. There's a lot of stuff out there. Maybe you can figure out what the truth is.
Yes.
Maybe you can't.
Yes.
It's kind of funny because they made texting, and I went into cell phones kicking and screaming, and then at first you had to pay for your text.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't want to do it, but then I was working, and I traveled with people younger than myself,
Mm.
and they wouldn't answer the phone.
Oh, sure. They wouldn't answer the phone call, yeah.
Yeah, but they said, text me, and then I can get to it later. I
Yeah.
said, okay. So I went and bought text.
Yeah.
So I could, because, we travel together, and it's like meeting times and all that. And I was like, okay, this works. But now, especially people my age, if somebody doesn't answer a text in like 3 minutes, they say, "What? Wonder what's happening to them," and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
And it's almost like you want people, but the beauty of it, sending a text is you give them time to answer.
Right. Well, and that's become a difficult thing. So I've switched back. I went from a smartphone back to a dumb phone, like a flip phone, just, back one generation. And it takes so long to text.
Oh, it's hard.
Oh, it's really hard.
It's hard.
And it's been one of the most
irritating.
difficult things. People will text me and then they'll like want to text in 5 minutes. I'm like, I've been working on this text for 5 minutes. Like if you get a
I still
sentence,
can't figure
if
out
you
the
get a
space bar,
sentence
yeah.
from me with like punctuation, I care. Like I have invested significant time. in this
I
thing.
learned that now when I text my daughter, I don't need punctuation. It's like she
Right,
doesn't
yeah.
expect it, so I'm not giving it.
Right, totally. But
Well-
sometimes there'll be just one word, and I come across as rude. But I have to tell people like I spent like 5 minutes on that. Like,
Yeah.
be thankful.
You're just writing, I'm fine.
right, exactly. Like I'm good.
Fine.
Who is
That's
this?
what that is one.
You know,
That's one
one nice
downside.
thing is on the internet, I can text my daughter every day, and I tell her, I say good morning, love you, and sometimes that goes to Peter and Doug because
And we respond accordingly.
He did this Sunday.
yeah,
This Sunday, yeah.
no one had texted me for a long time, and
Yeah.
then he sent me a panic email about your interview, and they sent him a long answer,
Uh-huh.
and then I forgot about that, and I just hit the first one, and I
Sure.
do the
Good
same.
morning. Love you.
Good morning, love
Yeah.
you.
Oh, that's sweet.
We felt really loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course, Doug and I'll take turns replying, but we'll say, well, we love you too. We miss you.
That's
We
awesome.
got home
Love.
okay as well.
That's
yeah.
right. That's awesome. It's so easy. It's so easy.
But it's also one of the downsides. It's easy to send somebody something by mistake
Oh, yeah.
and not be able to take it back.
Right.
Or if there's emails all linked together and you're trying to answer one person but have some privacy,
Yeah.
you
Reply
can
all has killed a lot of jobs.
Yes,
Yeah.
it has. It has. No, and I think the challenge is like, okay, what is texting good for? What is a phone call good for? What can you only do in face-to-face contact, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're rediscovering all that on the other side of COVID. You know what I mean?
And we
Like,
have to stop and think about it, which maybe is a good thing.
right, which I think is a really good thing. Like,
Oh,
what's the best? Oh, like Zoom would be good for this, or et cetera, et cetera. Being able to discern what's this type of communication good at, and then using it for that, keeps us from being dehumanized, and actually allows us to like connect with each other in deeper, more meaningful ways.
My
You've gotta
wife
think about it that
my wife won't answer the phone if it's not a number she recognizes.
Sure.
So if my phone had died and I borrowed someone's phone and it was an emergency, I wouldn't get through.
So
She
you
would
gotta
ignore it.
text.
So you gotta text. You gotta know what to do.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe she'll believe it. Yeah.
Well, we'll tell you the rest of that text when we get back.
I like the hugs and kisses. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm Peter. Doug is still Doug, and we are here with Ken Robertson, who has many titles and has been totally awesome. So we're doing a very special segment of, we haven't talked about Easter.
Oh, that's right. We did last week when it was
a little bit, yeah.
So this is the Easter.
This is the Easter episode.
Red.
Yeah. So
technically airing on Monday, Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So these are the questions. We have many viewers of many different beliefs, and there may be people that have never heard of Easter or know anything about it.
Yeah.
Can you give a couple of ideas? What's Easter all about? But also, in some of the different traditions of the churches, there seems to be sort of different, I don't know if disciplines are the right word, but different kinds of things that go on during the Easter season that Christians are encouraged to do. Maybe mention a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Easter is, I would say, the most significant holiday in Christianity. Sometimes Christmas gets that kind of designation, but that's a lot because of the cultural overlap. Easter is the center because Easter is the celebration of the event that really kicks off Christianity as a faith in a meaningful way, because it celebrates the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead after he was crucified on what we call Good Friday, which sounds ironic. But when we say resurrection, it's important to know we don't just mean like he came back to life for a little while and then died again. We also don't mean that he didn't really die, he just kind of swooned and he came back, and we don't just mean that the disciples saw a hallucination of him. What resurrection meant in that day was that body and soul were reunited and renewed, made new, almost like a new creation. Almost like creation was being made all over again, such that it would never fall apart again. And so Jesus' resurrection from the dead really symbolizes that death is not final, that evil cannot win, that powerful tyrants and oppressive empires that would do terrible things like put people on crosses are going to be conquered. All these different things. It's almost like if you think of the Big Bang as the beginning of the universe, it's almost the Big Bang of the new creation, of the universe all being made new. Everything kind of comes from that point. So it is the day. So there are lots of different traditions associated with this. In our own church, we do something called the Great Noise, where when we walk into an Easter service, we make as much noise as we possibly can, see how high we can make the decibel meter in celebration, and sort of a raucous celebration. And we're not sort of the most raucous church that ever was, but on Easter, like this is something we do. But the other piece of Easter season is the main discipline is actually feasting. Because in the run-up to Easter, in the preparation for Easter, everything kind of points towards the cross and what happened on the cross, the significance of the cross. And when you think about the cross, like that's an extremely difficult event, right? It's an event of sacrifice where Jesus is giving himself for us. So we're called in the season of Lent, running up to the cross, to sacrifice things, especially things that maybe don't help us be the fullest version of ourselves that we can be. But in the Easter season, it's all about feasting and delight and joy. So N.T. Wright is a Bible teacher that I listen a lot to, and he says if in Easter or if in Lent you cut back on alcohol, you have a little glass of champagne every day in Easter season, because now everything is moving towards, kind of rolling downhill in a good sense, towards the restoration, the renewal of all things. All the sad things are going to come untrue, just as Jesus' death was a sad thing that came untrue. That's the beginning. That's the Big Bang. Everything's flowing out from there. So we feast.
I've heard the word almsgiving, and I'm not sure I totally understand how that fits in it. I've heard people emphasize it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so almsgiving is just another form of generosity, specifically generosity to those who have less than us, right? To the poor, quote unquote. Giving is something that's done year-round in the Christian faith. It's one of the core spiritual disciplines. In the season of Lent is actually the time when almsgiving is focused on as a particular emphasis to in one sense, like, give until it hurts and then give a little bit more as a sign and as a reflection of and a response to the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. He gave up everything so we can afford to give maybe a little more than feels comfortable. So that's where that tradition comes from. But often Lent is that sort of time of spiritual preparation, getting ready for the celebration that's coming at Easter.
Now, one thing that is always meaningful to me, and I don't want it to sound morbid, but just the whole idea of an Ash Wednesday where, someone's telling you, you came from dust, brother, you're going back to dust.
Yep.
That is somewhat humbling, and there's a certain reality to that.
Yep.
I was at a friend's funeral today. Maybe I'm just thinking about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is that sort of the official start of the Lent season?
Yeah, Ash Wednesday is the official start of the Lent season. So it happens, 40 days before Easter. But I think sometimes religion, Christianity, gets the rap of being sort of pie in the sky, being sort of happy-clappy. But I think authentic faith wrestles deeply with those hard pieces, with those hard things, and recognizes, man, there are things we actually need rescue from. I think sometimes things like death, things like sickness and illness, things like long-term care, for the elderly, we kind of shove it off to the side of society so we don't have to think about it, right? Because it's just hard, and we'd rather not think about it than actually spend time dwelling on it because it's depressing. But authentic spirituality looks that stuff right in the face and says, this is not the way things are meant to be. I'm not going to ignore it or try to escape from it. I want to seek a victory over it. And I think that is fundamentally the Christian story of not, let's just try not to be hurt. Let's try not to suffer. No, there is real suffering. There's really hard things we're going to go through. But there is victory on the other side of that suffering. There is resurrection on the other side of crucifixion. And that is a real solid, meaningful, robust hope that can stand up in the midst of anything life can throw at us. Because whatever hard happens to us, Jesus went through that as well and still came out the other side in victory.
Yeah. Let me ask this as a follow-up.
Go ahead. Say, we put aside, getting older and that, but, when you hit our age, many of our friends, I know Peter and I, we have older parents, and it comes a lot on your mind.
It hits home.
And it hits home, and spend a lot of time praying and thinking about these issues because you don't know when the right time to do certain things
That's
are.
right. And I think as a pastor, you get some opportunities to step into those places.
Right, more than
like it
most
kind of
people.
develops an old soul because you're at lots of people's bedsides, et cetera, et cetera. You're seeing lots of things that are not the way they should be, and it will either overwhelm you, or it will drive you to: is there actually any hope for this? And I believe there is, and that's what Easter is all about.
Why? We'll save this question for the next segment, but I'm going to ask you. Why do people fail or give up on God? Not a quickie.
Not a quickie.
We'll be right back.
Real one.
It has to be a quickie. It's our last segment.
Hi, I'm Peter from Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching, and as you know, I do help people with drug and alcohol recovery issues. I love to help people get better. But I also offer a variety of other services, including regular life coaching services. I've helped several people write and finish a book. I've helped a doctor that was in medical school graduate and then get into a residency. And I also actually have quite a background in mathematics, and I do some math tutoring for the GED as well as the ASVAB for those that are thinking about a career in the military. So my contact information is on the screen. Please send me an email or a text, and we can talk about some of these services and how I can help. That's Peter Grigg at Pikes Peak Recovery Coaching. Welcome back to the third chair. I'm here with myself, Peter, Doug, and our...
You're here with yourself.
I'm here with myself.
Need to go to the doctor, man.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm glad you remembered your name.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. That medicine is really helping. And the Reverend Ken Robertson from IAC Church. And I ended on a tough question, and I didn't mean it to be a downer. I just have seen so many people, you know, they say they got up from God, but it seems like it's more they're angry at the people in the church that have hurt them. Have you had a sort of an observation of that?
Yeah, no, I think there's two main reasons people give up on God. One, I think, is they're pissed at the church because they expect more from the church than the church is able to give them. I think part of that's just because we're all broken, we're all busted up. The church never claims to be perfect, right? I really resonate with we're beggars pointing the way to other beggars to find bread. Like we never get out of the place of being beggars, right? We don't have all this figured out. In fact, if you think you have it figured out, then like church is actually not the place for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a misunderstanding. But also the church has done some terrible things, and the church always needs to be confessing and repenting. I think the other hard thing though is that people experience real suffering, and they wonder if God cares. Like, does God see? Does God know? And they feel alone in that suffering.
Where's God?
And I think the weekend where this is airing, right, or being released, this Easter weekend, is actually the best answer Christianity can give to that. Is where is God? In the Christian understanding, he goes to the cross. He enters into all that pain and suffering himself. He doesn't stand at a distance. He actually comes in, and out of that the resurrection comes and everything. But that I think is real hope when we're in those suffering places. We feel like God has let us down. God doesn't care. He cares enough to join us in that suffering. And I think that can be a real encouragement while we are waiting for the day when all things are made new. You know, we live most of our lives sort of before that resurrection day when we see it. And we can trust that it will be, I think. But in the meantime, we can trust that he's here with us in it.
And I know you could talk about this for an hour, but sometimes I think it's also when we're suffering, we just don't see that he actually is there with us. Sometimes we just don't notice that he's there, and if we actually took out a paper and pen and wrote down all the good things still going on, we could have a nice list of evidence that he's there working.
It clouds our ability to see. But, but no, I think there's something objective about Jesus going to the cross, entering into that suffering with us. That if there's other people that can remind us of that, and even be a sign of that, being with us in the suffering, that can help us. But I think those are some of the reasons people give up on God. But the good news is, I think even when we give up on God, God doesn't give up on us.
Thank God.
Amen. Amen.
And if people are interested in finding out more about IAC or some of the work you're doing or the church that you pastor, what's the best way for them to do that? Yeah,
so I'm pastor at International Anglican Church here in Colorado Springs, and you can kind of get a hold of us at our website, springsiac.org, or my email is pastorken@springsiac.org. But really, truly, if there's any church that fits, that you're curious about, show up and have an open mind and give lots of grace, because nobody's perfect, and see what's happening. Be curious, not judgmental.
Humble and curious.
Curious, not judgmental.
Nice.
Yeah.
Rather than arrogant and presumptuous.
Rather than arrogant and presumptuous, indeed. Yeah, I think
a
saint.
on that.
I think a saint said, Ted Lasso, Saint Lasso said, "Be curious, not judgmental."
That's nice. Saint Lasso. I thought it was the quarterback of the Eagles, but anyways.
Now he hurts.
Well,
it's in the show now.
Doug is probably too soon for that.
When we're recording this, it's too soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you for watching and giving attention, and it's always our privilege and honor to share content that we hope you find interesting and helpful. Please,
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
you're welcome.
Thank you for coming. We truly are grateful. And please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell icon so that you know when we've uploaded another episode. And good night from the third chair.
This has been the third chair.